Hello and welcome back to Israel with Aline. Today we came to the extreme south of Israel to get to know the tabernacle, and we will have the unique opportunity to see with our own eyes what the tabernacle built by Moses at the foot of Mount Sinai looked like. The place that for centuries was the heart of the 12 tribes of Israel. We are going to get to know this place in depth, including the Holy of Holies, the place where the Ark of the Covenant was located. So, if you are ready, let's get started. The story of the tabernacle begins after the slavery of Egypt, after the 12 tribes suffered for 400 years. Finally, God, in a grand way, with the 10 plagues and the opening of the Red Sea, the people could finally go out to freedom in the middle of the desert. And one of the first things God is going to do is try to establish an even stronger connection with the people. And that's why Moses is instructed to go up Mount Sinai. There he will receive the tablets of the law with the 10 commandments and also the instructions of the tabernacle. See how important this place is. At the same time that God passes the 10 commandments, the basis of all morality and all faith in God, he also passes the instructions of the tabernacle. And that's why we came here to show you what this place looked like, so we can better understand the Bible and the 12 tribes. So folks, you are invited to join me in the Tabernacle of Timna. Let's go. When we pick up the Bible to read at home, it's a beautiful thing. And we start with Genesis, the story of the creation of the world, the sin of Adam and Eve, Noah's Ark, and the stories are fascinating. And we keep advancing in the Bible until suddenly we reach a part of the book of Exodus, where the book changes completely. The book talks about measurements, construction materials, how the tabernacle should be built, disassembled, and reassembled. And many people sometimes end up skipping these chapters because they don't find them that interesting. Sometimes these chapters and also the genealogies. But folks, nothing in the Bible is too much or too little. If God wanted to write the entire history of the people of Israel, the entire history of the world, the Bible would be a gigantic encyclopedia. But the Bible is a relatively small book. So everything that was put into it has some reason. Nothing was done by chance. And it's not by chance, folks, that the Bible has 20 chapters dedicated to the tabernacle. This without counting all the chapters that talk about the sacrifices that should be made in it, and then in the Temple of Jerusalem. The subject that is most discussed, that has the most chapters dedicated in the entire Bible, is the tabernacle. And I can assure you folks that nothing is there by chance. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to understand why the tabernacle is so important to the people of Israel, to the 12 tribes, and also to all of humanity. And now we're going to open the entrance to the tabernacle, and you are invited to enter with me. When the people of Israel leave the slavery of Egypt, the people number more than 2 million. And among us, doesn't this seem like a temple for so many people? How could everyone enter here? The answer is that they couldn't. Inside here in the tabernacle area, it was only allowed for the tribe of Levi. Inside the courtyard was the tribe of Levi. And in the sanctuary that we will get to know a little later, only the family of Cohen was allowed, which was a specific family within the tribe of Levi. So imagine that here were the people, the Levites and the Cohens, who performed the temple services, and around thousands and thousands of huts, the people of Israel approached from all around, but from the outside, and they came up to this door to deliver their sacrifices. So today we are entering the area that was dedicated to the tribe of Levi. I find this interesting because for me it's always interesting to think that my maternal family are Cohens. They were priests of the Temple of Jerusalem, and also before that of the Tabernacle. And also it means that they are part of the tribe of Levi. So many generations ago my family could enter. But of course not me in this case, because this was for the tribe of Levi, but the men were the ones who entered and made the sacrifices. Now let's take advantage and get to know this replica. The first thing is the size that we mentioned. It was made in full size, but the Bible doesn't give us instructions in centimeters, meters, kilometers. The Bible uses cubits. How much is a cubit? A cubit is the measurement from the elbow to the tip of the fingers. This here is a cubit. So at that time, a cubit would be around 48 centimeters. And the Bible, for example, tells us that the altar, which is what we're seeing here, the first thing behind me, that the altar, it was 5 cubits. So I invite you to measure with me to see if the replica is really correct. You have to remember that the cubit was a measure of a man's size. So probably a little bigger than mine, but I have to have about 5 cubits here. Look with me, folks. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There's a little space left over, but you have to remember that a man's cubit is a little bigger, 48 centimeters. So the width here is 5 cubits, as the Bible tells us. And what was this place used for? Here the sacrifices were brought. So imagine that the priests came here, for example, with the lambs. It was not the only thing sacrificed here, but the main sacrifice, the Passover sacrifice, was the lamb. So the animals were brought here, and here they were sacrificed, and also the sacrifice was burned here. And you can see that this altar has 4 horns, as the Bible orders. So we are seeing them here, and we can see that they are painted red, because the blood of the animals was placed on the horns. Here, even though all the measurements are original, the blood is not. The blood is really paint. But the interesting thing is, the first thing we see entering is the altar. But it was not the first thing the priest did. Before they could sacrifice, they had to purify themselves, and the purification was done through the waters that are right there. This is the basin used for purification. Guys, the Bible doesn't tell us its size, so this is an assumption because we don't know its size in the tabernacle. Now these basins that we're seeing here were used for washing hands and feet. Now if we take the water and wash our hands here inside, what happens is that the dirty water falls here, and we don't want to dirty or pollute the water inside the sink. So how it was done, and the water was taken, and on the outside of the sink, the hands and feet of the priests were washed, and so the water fell, and so it did not get dirty, it did not become impure what was inside here. So, assuming that our priests have already purified themselves, have already made sacrifices, Let's get to the main part. This here is the sanctuary itself. This here is the place known as Kadosh, the holy place. And we can see that the sanctuary and all this construction of the tabernacle is done in a provisional way. You can see many tied ropes. It is made in pieces and pieces and pieces because the whole purpose of the tabernacle was to be a mobile temple for the people of Israel. The tabernacle will be built at the foot of Mount Sinai, but the people will not stay there for long. When the time comes for the people to move, they disassemble the tabernacle and the priests and Levites carry it to the next location. And many times this place was assembled and disassembled. And this also makes sense because the tabernacle was not even bigger, because otherwise it would be very difficult or practically impossible to move it in the desert. Because folks, I can assure you, as someone who is here on a sunny day, that life in the desert is not easy, and even more so to carry all this structure in the desert, especially in the summer. It was really a challenge. But now, yes, we are going to enter the sanctuary. Let's go. The first thing I think we notice when we enter the sanctuary is the golden menorah. The menorah does not have size specifications, so there are several theories about the size of the original menorah. Here the project team believes it was this size. Perhaps in the second temple of Jerusalem it was even larger. But the most important thing is that it had to be made of pure gold, and on top there were the oil lamps. The oil was put in from inside and it was lit here, and this was the only source of illumination for the entire sanctuary. This means that this light, it reflected on the walls that were made of gold, and it created here an illuminated environment that was really a very special aura. And all the light was from this small menorah. Really very special. And here on the side, I want to show you the table of breads. Here was a table with 12 breads. Why 12? Because of the 12 tribes of Israel. This is the heart of the 12 tribes of Israel for centuries and centuries, until much later when the temple will be built. And 12 loaves, they represent how God provided, how God sustained all his people and gave them everything they needed. In the desert it was manna, but the bread means not only in the desert, throughout the entire history of the people of Israel. From the time of slavery until the future, in the promised land, God provided for them. And this bread, it was eaten once a week by the priests and then replaced. And now we are going to see the altar of incense. And also to make a demonstration for us, I brought my father, Dr. Jorge. Shalom, Father.
Shalom, daughter. And look, thank you very much for allowing me to relive a situation from thousands of years ago, a unique situation. Thank you. Shalom, everyone.
So, my father hasn't done it yet. The first time he's going to do it will be in the chamber. He's even here with the matches in his hand, anxious, because the incense, folks, were a very important part of the priest's work here. So, we have here the same type of incense that was in the tabernacle. So, Dad, can you light them for us? Let's go. So we can already see the smoke coming out of the incense here. What smell are you feeling?
It's a unique and wonderful smell, unlike anything I've ever experienced.
Oh, you can put it in here. Why don't you recognize the smell of this incense? Because the incense that is dedicated to the tabernacle and the temple and of Jerusalem was a mixture of 11 spices, different. Some that we know as cinnamon, some more special like myrrh and frankincense.
I will put it here in Portuguese, but I don't remember the names in Portuguese. I'm going to tell you, this smell is spectacular.
And that's what we put a little stone, as it was in the temple really. Now let me show you. They would take the incense stones, they were placed inside the utensil, and they were crushed. They were then crushed until they became powder. So it will take a few seconds here until they become powder. And then this powder, you can take it here, was placed on the altar, and this powder is what burned and brought this smell. We have here an incense that we lit. There's one from before, and there's a little bit of powder, and the smell already starts to dominate the environment. And we have to remember that in the tabernacle, how many of these little stones were lit? The equivalent of 50 or 70 stones per day, twice a day. So imagine really a column of smoke coming out of here with this smell that really was wonderful. Wonderful, indescribable. And it would come out of the saint, it would spread around, and all the people could smell it. And that's why there was a prohibition on using that same combination of incense anywhere other than the tabernacle or the temple. Why? Because this smell is the smell that connected people and reminded people of the house of God. And it wasn't right for people to light this in their homes simply to make the house smell good. But then, folks, here you can get a small taste, a small demonstration of what the incense altar was like, lit by the priests of the tribe of Levi over 3,000 years ago.
Congratulations on the explanation. Wonderful. And look at the high priest's clothing. I wanted you to explain because it's something different and very beautiful there.
Sure, no problem at all, folks. I'm going to show you here the high priest's clothing. It wasn't for all the priests, but only for the high priest who was chosen. It was a lifetime position, meaning he was going to be high priest until the last day of his life. And we can see the clothing was made with the best materials of the time. The gold was really made of gold. Here the best fabrics, and here we can see 12 stones. The 12 stones symbolize the 12 tribes of Israel because he was the high priest of all 12 tribes, and each tribe had a stone dedicated to it. They weren't random stones. So here we can see this breastplate that in Hebrew is called Roshan. And here on top it is written Kadosh Ladonai. Kadosh is holy, and Ladonai for Yud Hey Vav Hey, which is the tetragram, the name of God. And besides all this luxurious clothing, literally, here on her feet there are bells. Can you hear it? Why are there bells on the high priest's clothing? This had a special use on the day of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, because behind me is the Holy of Holies. So this here is the Holy, and here is the Holy of Holies, the place that only one person could enter, the high priest, and only one day a year. He would go in to pray for the atonement of the sins of all the people of Israel. Now this place was so powerful that when he entered, he could literally die. Sorry folks, I'm finding it beautiful here with the incense rising right in front of me, just like it really was back then. But the high priest could enter and die, so the bells served so that when the high priest was praying, the people and the priests who were here could hear that he was moving and that he was still alive. But if the bell stopped ringing and he died inside, who could go in to remove his body? Waiting a whole year for the next Yom Kippur, for the next Day of Atonement, to remove him made no sense, since bodies are impure and we are literally talking about the holiest place in the world. But also other people could not enter. So what was done was a rope was tied to the high priest's foot when he went in, so that if necessary, he could be pulled out by the foot and removed without the need for another person to enter. But since we are here in a replica, we will be able to enter here in the Holy of Holies, in the Kodesh, the Kodeshim. So folks, let's go. And what was so important in the Holy of Holies? Here was the Ark of the Covenant. And the Ark of the Covenant was the place of divine presence the whole tabernacle was. I personally don't like the Portuguese translation of tabernacle. The Hebrew name for tabernacle is Mishkan, which means dwelling or abode. It means that this place here is the dwelling of God. So I think this is a much more appropriate name for this place than simply tabernacle. And here in the dwelling of God specifically, God was found among the cherubim of the Ark of the Covenant, as it is written in the following verse. And there I will meet with you, and I will speak with you from above the mercy seat, from between the two cherubim which are on the Ark of the Testimony, about everything which I will give you in commandment to the children of Israel. So see how strong this biblical passage is? The place of divine presence in this world was exactly here. Obviously, God is everywhere and He can hear us everywhere. But He had a special place in this world, which was the tabernacle, and after the tabernacle, the temple of Jerusalem. Now let's talk about the Ark of the Covenant, which in itself is a controversial subject. The first doubt is what the cherubim looked like. Here we see a representation of two cherubim, but we will see in different places they are represented in a different way from each other. So we don't exactly know what the cherubim looked like, but they might have looked like this. And it was from between the cherubim that God spoke. So what really mattered here was obviously the divine presence, but very important is what was inside the ark. And now to open the ark, my father, could you please do the honors?
The honors you do for me, right? To be here and show.
And what was inside the Ark of the Covenant were three things. And you can see them written here in ancient Hebrew. In addition, we can see them written here in ancient Hebrew. In addition, we see Aaron's rod that blossomed and also a pot of manna. And now I have a challenge for you. First, let's close the ark here. What's the challenge? The question is, how was the ark transported? Often when we see images and reproductions of Jericho, the people are walking around the walls with the Ark of the Covenant exposed and everyone seeing the cherubim. But how so? The Ark of the Covenant could not be seen by the people, not even by the priests, only by the high priest once a year. And now the challenge. If the entire tabernacle was disassembled into pieces, we can see here the pieces that were going to be disassembled if we are going to disassemble all of this, how can we take the ark from here to a distant place without everyone seeing it? Whoever knows the answer to how the ark was transported without the people being able to see it, leave it here in the comments. Meanwhile, you can stop the video and leave it in the comments. And now I'm going to tell everyone how this was done. The first thing is that the ark was not at the back of the Holy of Holies, but exactly in the middle. So imagine the ark right here, the small ones in this direction, and yes, the rods were in this direction, the small ones in this direction, and yes, the rods were in this direction, like this, going behind the cherubim, and they went from what we sometimes see in representations. And the secret is this: when transporting, the priests arrived here from the outside of the paroche, the veil, and they knocked down this entire veil, bang, on top and covered with cloths, these colorful cloths. Over this cloth and covered with cloths, these colorful cloths. Over this cloth was placed another blue cloth, and over all of this were placed animal skins. And then with 3 layers around, then they would take the ends of the rods that would then be out, and then they could carry, no one could see the Ark of the Covenant. So the Ark was carried by the priests, but covered with 3 different layers. So whoever knew this story can leave it here in the comments, but it's a very interesting fact that even I didn't know for many years, so I wanted to share this with you. So the next time you see anywhere that representation of the Ark of the Covenant exposed outside the tabernacle or the temple, historically it's wrong. And now let's let the Holy of Holies feel for the last time, hear the smell of the tabernacle incense, and remember that the entire Bible is important. From beginning to end, every verse of the Bible teaches us something. And also, everything that was here in the tabernacle had a historical reason. The replica of the tabernacle that is in Timna Park. If you, the replica of the tabernacle that is in Timna Park, if you are going to visit the south of Israel, really do not miss visiting this fascinating place. A kiss, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time.